hear me. So as I mentioned, the new update for Hurricane Dorian just came out. That was released at 8 a.m. and we have some good news in the forecast for you with Dorian. Once you guys can hear me, if you guys could just give me a thumbs up in the comments and let me know that you have sound. I think I did fix it because I can see the mic popping up here. So I'm going to keep going. Perfect. All right, good deal. Dorian's update. The two big things that we have here, Dorian is moving again. Dorian's been stationary since yesterday afternoon, sitting in the same place, and it is finally beginning to move. Second good news, Dorian's been weakening. Again, that's kind of a double-edged sword there, because although it's weakening, it's still a major hurricane. It's still a Category 3, still an extremely dangerous storm. So here's a look at it over the past couple of hours. I think that this is the past 6 hours. And look at where the eye starts here. This is kind of where it was all yesterday, just on the northern side of Grand Bahama Island here. It is finally starting to lift away. Now its movement 1 mile per hour, but it's moving. That's a good thing. It's making that northern turn, no longer forecasting a landfall on the east coast of Florida. That is great news. Here's a look at showing up on the satellite radar imagery. We have these outer bands of Dorian kind of lashing on shore. So seeing some of the videos here from South Florida up through the Treasure and Space Coast, Dorian's packing some gusty winds there. They're seeing some tropical storm force gusts upwards 40, 50 miles per hour, but no hurricane force winds yet. And if Dorian does stay far enough offshore, the entire state of Florida, we could go without these hurricane force winds. So that's great news. Again, we are kind of avoiding this worst case scenario. The Bahamas, they saw the worst case. For Grand Bahama Island, it doesn't get any worse than that. The pictures, the videos that are circulating on social media, they're just horrible. It's absolutely terrifying. So the good news for us here in Florida is that this new track is going to be taking it offshore, off the east coast. Florida's not even in the cone anymore, so that's great news. Here we have Dorian right now, just north. And again, Dorian has just kind of been sitting in place, stationary, since I believe the 5 o'clock update came out from the National Hurricane Center yesterday. We were looking at a stationary hurricane. Look at the movement now northwest at 1 mile per hour. It's barely moving, but it's moving. So that's good news, and you can see its track here. By 2 a.m. Wednesday morning, that is tomorrow, we're going to be seeing that right here off the Space Coast. Here's Brevard County, Indian River County, Volusia County. It's going to be right kind of up through central Florida off the east coast. Now again, the extent of hurricane force winds will likely not make it onshore if it follows this track. Still probably going to be getting hurricane impact. So again, I'm not downplaying Dorian for the east coast of Florida. I'm just saying it could be worse, as this is going to be very similar to Matthew back in 2016. The track of Matthew went right up the left side of where this current cone is, so a little bit closer, and it was a little bit stronger. So this will be very comparable to what we saw from Matthew for the east coast, except maybe a little bit lesser impacts. They're still going to be dealing with beach erosion. Beach erosion has been ongoing already. That's one of the worst things, is that these beaches, you lose all your sand when you have water up to the dunes. So that's going to be an issue, especially around high tides. The beach erosion will be bad. They'll see some storm surge. It's forecast around 4 to 7 feet up and down north central Florida. Again, most areas there on the barrier islands that they are evacuated, first off. Second off, the elevations are usually above 4 to 7 feet, up near Daytona Beach, down towards Satellite Beach, Indian Harbor Beach, those areas, about 10 feet. So with a storm surge of 4 to 7 feet, again, that's not good, especially during the high tides, but most of that would be protected by the dunes, assuming the storm stays offshore. So they're going to have the gusty winds, tropical storm force. They're going to have some bands of heavy rainfall lashing through, but all things considered, tropical storm force conditions, not the worst when just a week ago you were forecasting the direct hit from a major hurricane. So again, we're really escaping what the Bahamas has been seeing for the past couple of days here up and down the state of Florida. I would assume that they'll be seeing some power outages, but we are looking at minimal impacts compared to what we could have been seeing. For the next couple of days, again, up through parts of north central Florida, Jacksonville, they'll be seeing those impacts more so through the day tomorrow. I think that impacts will begin to be felt. I mean, they're already seeing some outer bands move onshore, but the real gusty winds and the outer bands kind of working in there later tonight for south central Florida, overnight, and then up through tomorrow for north Florida. So this is going to be something that we see minimal impacts from. Nothing to be concerned about if you're watching here from the Big Bend, North Florida, South Georgia. If you're east of 75 over closer to Jacksonville, then you're looking at the gustier winds. Again, mainly the coastal community is going to be the ones impacted by this in Florida, but if you live west of 75, we'll see some scattered shower activity from those outer bands push through. You'll see wind gusts upwards maybe 20, 25 miles per hour, but not tropical storm force. We're not going to be getting in those damaging wind potential, really. It's just going to be a little bit breezy outside. For the most part, we're going to be wrapping around this dry side of the circulation with lots of subsidence. That means that the air will be sinking on the backside of the circulation, and what that gets you is some dry, hot air as it, again, wraps around the backside. So you have these storms that rotate like this. When you get wrapped around the backside of this, we're going to be seeing these winds out of the northeast over the next few days. And this right here is going to be some real dry air. That's going to be sinking down on the backside of it. That's going to limit our rain chances. Lift is one of the main ingredients for rain. So with sinking air, we don't have any lift, and the air is going to be dry, so we don't have moisture anyway. So this is really going to make our forecast hot and sunny for the rest of the week. Starting tomorrow through the weekend, we got highs between 95 to 97. If you went to the FSU game last weekend and you thought it was hot, the ULM game is also looking hot. Good news, it's just a 5 o'clock kickoff. Here are the some of these products for the coastal areas up and down Florida, Georgia, South Carolina. They have hurricane warnings in effect still through the Bahamas and up and down the Treasure Coast up through about St. Augustine. Orange area, that is tropical storm warning. They have these down in South Florida. They also have them up through parts of coastal Georgia. That looks around Savannah, Tybee Island area, and then hurricane watches further north up through Charleston. Not quite yet made it up to Myrtle Beach. Now, we'll see these continue to be issued further north in the coming days. Something, again, not downplaying this storm at all. We've seen what it can do. But some silver lining for us here locally is that, especially on the east coast of Florida, we're not going to be seeing that landfall, therefore sparing us from the primary impacts. We can excuse me. All right, we're going to look at why Dorian is making this northward turn, which it is about to do. Excuse me. We need to wait for this high pressure system to kind of fade off to the east. And we're also going to be seeing a trough kind of push it away. So I'm going to show you both these graphics right now. This first one is for the high pressure system. As that kind of slowly retrogrades eastward, this is going to give Dorian that escape route that we needed to finally make this northern turn, which we think it is doing right now. Again, this is finally starting to pick back up from its stationary movement that we've been seeing since yesterday. And you can see it right here. Look at this line on the water vapor imagery that's pushing down through parts of Florida. Curvy line might show you a little bit better. Right there. This is pushing down. And what this is going to do is it's going to kind of limit Dorian's route. And what we're going to see Dorian do once it moves northwest is near the coast, but it's not going to be able to get up there. So it's going to ride up there. This looks kind of messy. There's a lot of arrows, but that trough that pushes down is going to kind of limit Dorian's westward potential as far as the track goes. That's why we're not expecting any direct impact. And this ridge up here is weakening, so Dorian's going to ride right up the coast there. And again, I think the best potential really that we have for landfall will be up in the Carolinas, up through probably North Carolina. Again, this track is very similar to what we saw with Matthew back in 2016. That was right up the east coast of Florida, and that did end up bringing some really bad inland flooding to the Carolinas, North Carolina specifically, costing a few lives. So it's not something to take lightly just because it'll be weaker, a Cat 1 or a Cat 2 at potential landfall, but sparing us from the worst impacts. Here's a probability of tropical storm force winds. Now look at the highest probabilities. They are all offshore. They really drop down exponentially once you start going inland. Great news. Here at the Big Bend, not looking at that, okay? We're just really not looking at a bad forecast from Dorian. And this is going to show you just that. Again, if you guys do have questions, please shoot them in here. I'm trying to answer most of them here without you having to ask. Here's a look at our forecast and focus. This is for sustained winds, not gusts, sustained winds. So as you go through the day, you kind of see these increase, especially for the coastal communities. That's really where it's going to stick out. But today, up to maybe 10, 15 miles per hour. That's just a breezy day. Tomorrow, as Dorian's closest, up offshore of North Florida, sustained winds 15, maybe up to 20 miles per hour. That's not that bad. You're not going to feel like you're outside in a tropical storm. Here are the gusts. So this is about as strong as the winds are. No, this is still sustained. This actually shows the coast out there as well. So tomorrow, you can see the eye of Dorian right here on the right side of your screen. look at some of these winds up and down along the coast. So they're talking 30, maybe close to 40 miles per hour. A tropical storm is 39 miles per hour. So assuming that Dorian stays far enough offshore where that track is now from the National Hurricane Center, we're avoiding hurricane force winds in the entire state. That is excellent, excellent, excellent news. Again, especially after Dorian made landfall as a Cat 5 in the Bahamas, the strongest storm since 1935 on Labor Day that hit the Keys in the entire Atlantic Basin. So not many folks remember that. Not many folks were there for that are still here today. So that means that it is something that it's unprecedented. And again, if you've seen those videos, those pictures circulating on social media from the Bahamas, they are absolutely terrifying, as that storm surge was 18 to 23 feet above the normal tide levels. People, water had up to their second floor of their homes, people trapped in their attics. Again, horrible situation. But as Dorian pulls away, we're going to be seeing more of that damage in the sunlight today once those communications get back up. Mostly for our area, we're really being spared from those direct impacts. Again, this is Wednesday afternoon as Dorian makes that kind of close ride up the coast, and you can see the eye on the right side of your screen. So as it does kind of make its closest approach to Florida, we're going to be seeing winds in our coverage area when Dorian is the closest, 15 miles per hour. We're not expecting any tropical storm force impacts. We're good locally. Again, it is going to be hot. It's going to be sunny. It's going to be dry. For our 7-day forecast, I got 95 tomorrow. And then on Thursday and Saturday, I have 97 degrees. Average in early September is 90. We're above normal. And a lot of that's due to the dry air that we're going to have in place. So that's great news. Your forecast in focus now. This is going to show you kind of what we're expecting from Dorian. And this is going to keep Dorian on the right side of the frame. And again, we're offshore here by a good bit. You're about 50, 60, 70 miles offshore. So the inner eye wall, that core, the strongest winds and the heaviest rainfall, that's staying offshore and mostly just getting kind of lashed by these outer bands. And as you continue to go through this evening, it's going to inch closer around the Cape. I think that's when it should make kind of its closest call with the East Coast, maybe 40, 50 miles offshore, bringing those gusty winds to parts of the Space Coast overnight. But tropical storm force winds, it's not a major hurricane. You're not seeing those direct impacts as we would if it was a landfalling hurricane. And our forecast and focus does keep it a good amount offshore once you get up through Jacksonville. Again, that's going to be tomorrow afternoon when we see our strongest winds here in Tallahassee. It's going to be 15 miles per hour. That's not bad at all. Here you go. Again, it's still an extremely powerful storm. If there were to be a landfall, it would not be good. But we're trending offshore. We're pretty much here within a day or two. Models have really fairly good agreement now that we've all come to terms with our major hurricane forecasting models that we're not going to see this Florida landfall. It's not even in the cone anymore. Good news there. So I'm going to keep saying that. Again, I'm not talking about the Bahamas. That's not good news because they've been battered in the past 24, 36 hours since it approached Marsh Harbor in its first landfall. But we are, again, on the better side of this, especially in Tallahassee. Right here is where you see all this dry air wrapping around the backside. Again, this is not going to be bringing us really any rain unless you live over near I-75, closer to Live Oak, Lake City. Those areas might see some scattered showers today and tomorrow. But as Dorian rides up the coast, its best chance for landfall will be around this area in the Carolinas. So again, very limited impacts here locally. I don't think it's anything that we need to be concerned about because it's not really going to impact our local Tallahassee forecast too much. If you do have folks that you know, friends, family up and down the East Coast, today's the day that those preparations are done by. People are already evacuated by now. Yesterday was mandatory evacuation up and down the Barrier Islands. Sunday was kind of that day for preparations that you should have been completed by now. Now it kind of threw a wrench in Labor Day weekend plans up and down the coast, but better safe than sorry. And being prepared for these things is always a good idea when you can see that destruction that it does through areas like the Bahamas. So you still have this Category 3, and it's finally moving northwest at 1 mile per hour. Good news. The track that Matthew in 2016, it was right off the east coast of Florida. I don't know if anyone remembers that storm, but that did kind of work right up the left side of where the cone was. It was about 40, 50 miles offshore. This current track, I believe, is probably about 70 miles offshore, so a little bit more. Now if we go to the left side of the cone here, it's still not going to indicate a landfall for Florida, so we're kind of outside of that. The Cape would be the closest, but you can start to get more towards that eye wall, but really spared from the worst. Again, max wind still 120 miles per hour. Max gust still 150 miles per hour. This is still a Cat 3 hurricane. This is a major 3 hurricane. It's just kind of a shell of its former self, but that doesn't downgrade any potential threat. The good news, though, by the time it does make any potential landfall up near the Carolinas, we're talking Cat 2, maybe even weaker. It is about to pop back out in the Gulf Stream, and what that means is that the water is going to be warmer and you're going to have some lower shear. So there is some kind of brief potential there as it enters this Gulf Stream moving northwest today that we could be seeing some re-intensification. Don't think we're getting back to a Category 5. No models have that. National Hurricane Center doesn't have that. But maybe a couple miles per hour in those max wind speeds. I think that we should be staying at a Cat 3 here over the next few days, though, as we make this close call at the east coast of Florida. For Florida, especially compared to the forecast that we saw last week with all the landfalls and some of them re-entering out in the Gulf, this is a best case scenario as you're just getting that close brush through. Don't want the beach erosion of the storm surge or the tropical storm force winds, but certainly better than seeing any kind of hurricane make landfall in the Sunshine State for you. So again, if you guys have questions, feel free to ask them in there. I'm trying to hit the important parts, but again, our threat here locally, it's low. We have nothing. We're going to be seeing breezy winds tomorrow, but our forecast is mostly hot and sunny for the rest of the week. For the coastal folks, they're still under hurricane warnings, and they should be either hunkered down or evacuated, but hunkered down either way for today, as today is the day that we're going to begin to see those impacts through South Florida, as Dorian does kind of pull away northwestward, as we're finally seeing it's not stationary anymore. That's great news. You can see the zoomed in look, and we're finally starting to get from the eye from, again, south to north. So we're moving slow, but we're moving. That's the biggest thing. Dorian has been parked for the past day, and it's kept areas like Freeport and other areas in the Bahamas inside the eye wall conditions of a major hurricane, as it's still a major hurricane, for 12 plus 16 hours. It's unbelievable. So the storm surge has been incredible. They've had areas with water 23 feet above normal tide levels, and the videos are absolutely devastating, seeing water up to people's roofs, and it's cost 5 lives, unfortunately, and I'm sure that number will be climbing once again they try to start locating all these missing people. So the Bahamas was not spared one bit. This was a worst case scenario. I compare it a lot to Hurricane Michael, because us folks up here in the Panhandle are all too familiar with that, especially over towards Panama City, Mariana, southwest Georgia, that saw the brunt of Michael. Imagine a storm like Michael that was stronger than Michael at landfall, which is hard to believe. Michael was a Cat 5. This was a stronger Cat 5, the strongest since 1935. Not only that, but this storm didn't move. Michael at least moved through quickly, but tack on 12 hours of storm surge and 12 hours of flooding rainfall, and then you have impacts that are just way beyond anything that you can even fathom. So again, that's kind of a loose comparison, kind of the best thing we have. This storm, I don't think you can really compare to anything that's ever happened before, because we don't remember 1935 and the Labor Day hurricane. The science wasn't as good, clearly. Science wasn't as good a couple years ago when we had Matthew up the coast, but here we are, and again, this storm was incredible. We're going to be seeing that close brush by the East Coast. Latest track, this is from the National Hurricane Center, right up there through today, up through South Florida. Once you get past midnight, you start moving up East Central Florida, and through the day Wednesday. That's when we're going to be working up Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon in this area. So, excuse me, local impacts, that's going to be, excuse me, that's going to be breezy winds. That's about the extent of what we're going to see locally. It's going to be hot and sunny. We got all this sinking air on the backside of this circulation wrapping down. Our rain chance is really just going to be limited. Nothing to be concerned about if you live in North Florida. If you got folks on the east coast of Florida, I do. I know a lot of us do have those interests over there. Let them know today that tomorrow is going to be kind of the worst of it, and they see those worst impacts, but most likely just tropical storm force winds, which isn't bad because our trough, our upper level trough from parts of the southeast, that's coming to save us. Again, you can kind of see that line here on the water vapor imagery. The blue indicates moisture, which you got a ton of that down towards Dorian, and that orange is dry air. This is going to be kind of working like this, and that's going to be pushing Dorian away from Florida. So the most likely track we have, it's going to kind of nudge westward near the coast, and then we're going to see it right out. So most likely landfall will be up through the Carolinas, but this kind of push, this trough that we have in the upper levels, It's keeping Dorian away from the Gulf. It's keeping Dorian away from the state of Florida. We are no longer looking at a landfall here in the Sunshine State. So that's great news. Again, last week we were forecasting a major hurricane potentially making landfall here in the state, right somewhere near South Central Florida. No longer. It's going to be moving up along the coast. The Carolinas still at risk, and Florida's still at risk for storm surge, for beach erosion, and heavy rainfall and gusty winds, but the winds should be about tropical storm force. Probably not going to be seeing much in the way of hurricane force winds over the next few days, as those likely stay offshore around the core of the storm. But if Dorian's 70 miles offshore, those hurricane force winds, they don't extend that far out of the center. We're not going to be seeing hurricane force winds 70 miles away from the eye moving on shore. We would need Dorian to track on the left side of that cone, a lot like Matthew did, and kind of make a very close brush by the coast to lead to that. But for the most part, up through the coastal areas, look when Dorian makes its closest approach on Wednesday, late morning, around lunchtime, and through the afternoon. The highest winds that we're seeing, these are sustained. You could see some gusts, but these are about tropical storm force. 39 miles per hour is tropical storm force. 39 to 74. Nowhere is even close to 74. We've got these around 15 to 20. That's not bad. The further east you live, the closer to the coast you live, expect breezier winds, maybe some more rain, but no issue here. Had a comment about canceling school in the Big Bend. We don't need to do that. That's not necessary. There shouldn't be any cancellations or anything unless it's because of people moving here or coming here to evacuate or to get away from the East Coast, which that makes sense. Again, they're under mandatory evacuation over there, but not something we need to be worried about. If you guys got any questions, shoot them in there. If not, I'm about to wrap it up. I think that we pretty much hit everything we needed to here. Again, the main points here are that Dorian is not a threat to us here in Tallahassee. Our forecast is going to be hot, sunny, and dry for most of the week. Dorian is not expected to make landfall here in Florida. It is starting to pull away, and the latest cone of Dorian keeps it offshore. So that is also really good news, not only for us, but for the entire state. So this is going to be very Matthew-esque, like 2016. You get this rider right up the coast, and then you're looking at potential landfall as a Cat 1, 2, or 3 up through the Carolinas. So not to say this storm is no longer a threat, but our coastal communities will likely experience tropical storm force winds, heavy rainfall as those bands move onshore, the potential, especially on the East Coast, for maybe some water spouts and spin-up tornadoes, but most of those are small and short-lived, just quick little things that push on shore. Again, shouldn't be at the beach for today or tomorrow if you're in those coastal communities. And beach erosion, some rough surf, shouldn't be out in the water, shouldn't be on the beach here today or tomorrow. So that's about the worst of the impacts. I think that we'll probably see some spotty power outages up and down the coast, but locally speaking, 10, 15 mile per hour winds, hot and sunny. Our forecast looks pretty good. So I do appreciate you guys watching. I'm going to do another one of these updates in about 2.5 hours as the next main update from the Hurricane Center comes out at 11 a.m. So I'll do a quick update again just to kind of see where it's at and see if anything changes with the track. But I think at this point we're pretty much locked into this solution, at least for Florida. And as far as we are concerned, we are looking at no landfall. Different for the Carolinas. They'll be changing as they're still a few days out, but we're kind of hyper local here, forecasting for Florida and the Georgia coastlines, which we are not expecting landfall. So that's good news. Again, I appreciate you guys watching. We're going to wrap this up now. If you guys have any more questions, leave them down there in the stream, or try to tune in at 11 when we get some new changes in the track and the intensity, and maybe we can answer them then. But I do appreciate you guys joining. I hope you'll have a great rest of your morning, and we will be seeing you here in just a few hours. Thanks.